non-human minds we will ever encounter aren't light years away, but already inside the human brain, waiting for the right chemical key. Today, I'm speaking with Andrew Gallimore, a neuroscientist who believes DMT may be less a hallucination generator and more a gateway to an entirely different class of intelligence. Thanks a lot for coming on to the Cosmic Tusk podcast, Andrew. I'm thrilled to talk to you.
Thanks for having me, George. Nice to speak to you.
Yeah, it certainly is. And Andrew was kind enough to get up early in Tokyo, Japan, where he is based, and join us today. I have spent hours listening to your podcasts over the last week or so, and I just think it's a fascinating subject and one we haven't touched on the Cosmic Tusk podcast, which is still relatively new. So I was definitely going to get to it. And this is nothing that a subject, again, that I'm familiar with, but privately. Not publicly. In other words, and I figured I'd have to come out of the closet here on this show. Despite being a conservative Southern golfer, family man, I've also done a lot of psychedelic drugs over the last, if you take it through decades, right? And I always did them because I thought there was something there, and was unaware until 10 years ago when people started, ayahuasca became popularized, that there was a drug that really was something there. And I want you to help elucidate for us where DMT puts you. The problem is that you're communicating something that is, I think it Pollard said in his book, is, or maybe it was Mirarosky, Brian Mirarosky, that it's an ineffable, that it can't be described in a sense. Am I correct? Is it a challenge?
Well, it's a reasonable description of the DMT state. I mean, Terence McKenna used to describe it as unenglishable.
Yeah. I think I heard you say it.
Yeah, it's kind of beyond language, and I think that's true to an extent, in that you enter a world that is, it's so strange, it's so bizarre, it completely defies it transcends the imagination, it defies any usual concept of what is and isn't possible, of what's real and what's not real, and it's just a world that could not exist. You know what I mean? It's not like you're going into a dream, you're just going to a different world as you imagine it, a different planet, for example. It's not like that. It's like you go to a world where the normal rules of physics, the normal kind of the topology is different, the geometry is different, the dimensionality is different. It's extremely complex. It's far more complex and intricate than the normal waking world, and is populated by beings that are neither animal nor human, that don't have any obvious referent in the normal kind of biological world. It's like you're seeing beings that are thoroughly alien. If you want to use the word alien, that's why the word alien was invented, was to describe these beings. That, they're not humanoid, they're not they're just, obviously there are some that have seemed to have curious, insectoids and things like this. Often they're just so bizarre that they are in fact beyond description. And I think the challenge for people when they come out of the DMT state is to kind of bring back stuff and kind of project it into a three-dimensional memory systems. Our memories are kind of designed for kind of recalling events that happen in this kind of mundane three-dimensional world that we occupy for the vast majority.
You said something interesting. You said it's not a dream world or something along those lines. You said the word dream.
You go into this higher dimension, but I kind of
getting a little lag.
Yeah.
Let's say, distinguish it from dreams, if you will.
Yeah, well, dreams are, so to kind of preface that, the normal waking world that you live in when you're awake and fully conscious. This is kind of it's this model of the environment that your brain is always constructing. You live in a world model constructed by your brain. This is kind of the world model that your brain has evolved and developed and learned to construct as a model of the environment. And when you go into the dream state, your brain is basically using those stored models, if you like, to construct this world in the absence of any kind of sensory inputs. This is why dreams, for the most part, and there have been lots of studies going back, decades and decades now, that look at the kind of the structure and the content of dreams. And dreams, for the most part, whilst they can be strange and they tend to kind of shift and be quite fluid, they tend to be of kind of selective simulations, if you like, of the normal waking world. I mean, people dream about doing the things that they do in the normal waking world. You know, the people that they meet are humans. They meet humans,
Right.
they meet domestic animals.
You meet family members, you have friends that come in and out of
Yeah.
dreams. That's right. They're
Sure.
familiar
These are the
characters,
kind of-
and you'll also be dragons and fantastical things. But I had that very interesting. That's a good distinguishing feature. And I guess another one would be
so that's
that
kind of
don't-
that's what makes that's what makes DMT kind of very, very difficult to explain, is because your brain starts you kind of perturb the brain with this simple plant alkaloid, and it stops constructing the normal waking world that your brain evolved to construct, and starts constructing this far more complex alien world that has no relationship to the normal waking world. So that's kind of the great mystery of how your brain achieves that, why your brain achieves that.
Do you have a standard way to differentiate it from other psychedelic drugs?
I think psychedelics, they sit on a kind of continuum in a way. So the classic psychedelics, let's kind of stick to that. So we're talking about what are called 5H serotonin 5-HT2A active drugs. So basically, there are drugs that have the same kind of mechanism in the brain.
Right.
They include LSD, the most famous, psilocybin from magic mushrooms, and DMT is also in that category, as is mescaline. And what the other psychedelics tend to do is they tend to kind of they disrupt your brain's world model. They create a more kind of fluid and dynamic version of the world. The brain's world model becomes kind of loosened up, and becomes much more free and much more dynamic and less stable. And this accounts for kind of most of the effects of the classic psychedelics. But that's really only the kind of the less intense levels of psychedelic states. And as you push further and further, eventually it's kind of like those old radio sets where you have a dial.
Yeah.
And if you nudge it out of tune, it starts to become noisy and weird, and then you get sort of noise. And then eventually, if you keep turning it, you get this new channel kind of crackles through the speakers. And it's kind of a similar thing, I think, with psychedelics, is that at first with the classic psychedelics, you get this loosening up, this much more free and fluid and dynamic version of the world that becomes increasingly more chaotic and disrupted, until eventually with DMT is able to kind of push the brain much, much further until you get this new channel, basically, this entirely different channel of consciousness, this entirely different world channel, this entirely different reality channel that kind of that you find yourself in.
And introduce the audience to those that aren't aware. Another thing that distinguishes it from dreams would be that we don't have a unified set of characters. Is one way to put it. I think you know what I mean. I'm sure you've got a better way of describing it, but you don't dream and my neighbor's over there dreaming and she's seeing the same unicorn I see, or she's always seeing something very similar to that. But there are classes of experiences and entities. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so So that's right. So characters that you meet in dreams will be personal to you, depending on who you know. You know, if you live on a ranch and um, you work with cattle every day, then you might well dream of cows, whereas other people who live in the suburbs might not dream of cows as often.
Yeah.
And there's actually studies of Amazonian tribes who and the kind of what do they see in their dreams, and
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
see panthers, they see snakes, they see
Yeah.
piranha fish, you know, that kind of thing. So it's very personal, and it makes sense.
Right.
But with DMT, what's unusual is that people see characters or being clearly extremely advanced, intelligent beings that are not human and not animal, but which do have these weird commonalities. So many people will describe the same kinds of intelligent beings. So I mentioned before the kind of insectoid, so mantises, these apparently highly intelligent mantis-like beings, not insects, but actual, you know, insectoid aliens, if you like. Some people describe the famous machine owls that Terence McKenna fame, these
Right.
small, jovial, giggling beings that
Yeah.
kind of bound around and that operate in great numbers, you know, millions and millions of them kind of bursting around the space. And so
Right.
there are many categories of these beings that are not human or animal, but which are seen to be commonly encountered by different DMT users across the world. And that's kind of very interesting, to say the least.
That is extraordinarily interesting. I think it's one of the most interesting fields of thought on the planet right now. And when I first heard that, read about it, etc., I'd say probably a decade or so ago, I was like, no shit. Well, that's an interesting drug that it puts people at the same place with the same you know, with I'm sure some differences and stuff, but there were enough common characters to suggest that you were actually being, for you know, lack of a better way to put it, since it is ineffable, into a different world, for God's sakes. And it wasn't
Yeah.
just a manifestation or a dredging up or a harvesting from your own experience. It was completely, literally alien to your experience, but shared by others. I mean, that tells everybody right there something different's going on, right? How does someone dispute? Or do you have critics? Do you have skeptics? I wouldn't think that you might have legal barriers and people that are uncomfortable with drugs and all of that. But do you have people that do not realize how interesting that is?
Well, I think you have three classes of people. You have people like me who have experience with DMT in the past, who truly does understand the immensity, the
Mhm.
strangeness of this experience, and who does, in my opinion, I feel that neuroscience has been struggling to explain the DMT state since it was first discovered. You know, since the first experiments with pure DMT in the 1950s, I
Yeah.
don't think science has a reasonable explanation for why, when you perturb the brain with this simple molecule, it should suddenly become capable of constructing these entirely alien worlds that are, you know, more real than real.
Right.
I don't think there's an easy explanation for that. So there's people like me that go, okay, there is something very, very odd going on here that we need to kind of grapple with. And then there are people that have never taken DMT, who just kind of imagine what it's like. They hear stories and they kind of, I don't know, they imagine they're
Take
watching. It's like
Yeah.
watching a cartoon or something,
Right.
and they just see, you know, interesting characters. But it's far more immense than that. And it's again, this comes back to the idea of it being beyond language. It's hard to articulate exactly how strange it is. And so they will say, oh, it's just your brain on drugs, man. You know, it's just your brain.
Right.
You're just messing with your neural circuitry, and that's why you're seeing these things. And to
You're
them, they don't.
hallucinating, for lack of a
You're
better
hallucinating.
term, or yeah.
Exactly, you're hallucinating. And then you've got the kind of more interesting category, which is the people who have done DMT often, and these are often scientists who will cling to the idea that this must be pure hallucination, as if their life depended upon it, because the alternative is simply unthinkable. The alternative that I propose as a possibility, that we are indeed interacting with some kind of intelligence, some kind of intelligent agent or agents. That's, as I wouldn't say spirits, I wouldn't say gods, or plant spirits, or even aliens. Really, all I say is that I think we're interfacing with some kind of intelligence. But of course, most neuroscientists and other scientists will scoff at the idea, and say, no, that's not possible. That cannot be the explanation. The explanation must be it's a type of exotic form of hallucination, and they will insist that that must be the case. And so there's a constant kind of battle between me and them, which is a healthy one. It's not healthy for people just to kind of accept my position and go, oh yeah, they must be spirits, or they must be aliens. I don't say that. But I act as the kind of the natural antagonist of the orthodox scientific community, in that I'm offering alternative explanations, which of course I invite criticism. I invite people to offer alternative explanations, and eventually we'll find our way towards the truth.
Did these people publish to the skeptics? I know they're responsible skeptics and probably good researchers and stuff, but do they actually publish things that say we believe this is hallucinations, or is that just at conferences and whatnot?
Well, I mean, there's in the last decade or so, there's been more and more neuroimaging work. So that's the standard neuroscientific approach, is to give someone DMT and then put them in an MRI scanner, or an EEG headset, and try to look for the neural correlates. So what is actually happening in the brain? What are the kind of changes that are going on in the brain that we can try to use to understand why DMT has these effects. But I think they're always left wanting. I'm yet to see a study that shows, oh, that's why everyone sees insectoid aliens, and that's why everyone goes to these hyper complex alien worlds. And I don't think we have an explanation for that. And I don't think any sober and honest scientist would make such a claim. But they assume, that eventually we're going to arrive at a simple explanation, a simple,
Got a little bit of a pause. A lot of the stuff flows back in on the buffer, so we should be okay.
Yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to test my.
It's not bad, Andrew. I think it's tolerable. But go ahead if you think there's a tweak.
It's I might be able to. It's annoying because I have several networks, and it might be trying to find the best one for me. And as it flips, it kind of switches. It freezes. But hopefully it's okay. But let me know.
It seems to be just fine. It seems to be just fine. Well, I've gotten to be pretty good friends through the years with Brian Murray, who wrote The Immortality Key, and would like to have him on soon. Yeah. And one of his signatures is that he's never experimented with hallucinogens himself. And that gives him a certain level of credibility with certain segments of the consuming public. I don't think that is universal. Like, it seems to me that 10, 20, 30 years ago, that, and I have some experience like this in my own scientific endeavors, that as soon as you did the drug, you were bought in. You literally drank the Kool-Aid. You were a druggie, so you were going to make every excuse you possibly could that it's something profound rather than something recreational. You're of a different class, where you have experimented with the subject of your experiments. Could you tell us about that, and when your own experiences with game, did your interest in such things predate your interest in the neurosciences and education? Where does it fall in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I've been interested in DMT since I was a teenager. Just reading articles by Terence McKenna and listening to Terence McKenna lectures back in the early days of the internet. This was so before he became, now you can find hundreds of his lectures on YouTube, but
you sure can.
Before, it was much more difficult. So, but I heard the stories, and they kind of fascinated me. This seemed to me like a drug that was entirely unlike the other psychedelics. It seemed to have this other quality that made Terence McKenna want to rant and rave about this as the most interesting thing, molecule, most interesting thing on this planet, he described it as. So that got my interest. And that was at the time when I was becoming interested in pharmacology and the idea of how molecules interface with the human brain to change consciousness, to change experience. But it wasn't until probably about a decade later that I actually experienced DMT, and that was a transformative moment, because that was the point. 30 seconds after I inhaled a lungful of DMT vapor, I knew that I was confounded. Basically, it was not what I was expecting. I couldn't have expected what I experienced, and that's the thing. It's like, you read all the books, you listen to all the McKenna lectures, you think you have an idea of what this DMT experience is, and then 30 seconds later you realize you don't have a clue, and you're in a world that was quite, at the time, it was undeniably apparent and obvious to me, completely undeniable, that I was in the presence of an immense, for want of a better word, alien intelligence. It was clearly a constructed world that had been there. I don't know how I know this, but I knew this, that it had been there for always, for billions of years. It was this, and it was shocking to me. It was horrifying, and it left me reeling. And I thought, this is, I'm at sea here. I cannot comprehend this, how this is possible. And that was the beginning. So that was 20 years ago, or more, at least. And since then, I've spent my time trying to get to grips with this model, trying to understand it. So that was my experience was the catalyst. And
you said it was horrifying, but you don't mean the actual trip, do you? You mean kind of the shock of what was available through the drug, or describe. And it was interesting. You said that people differ in their ability to describe the experience, or at least remember it. They might have difficulty describing it, but you said there are some people that remember every damn thing that happens on the other side of the veil.
Yeah.
And will come back and attempt to describe it, but they've got it in their head. And then there's a range of people, and you were on the other side where you don't quite remember everything. You remember, characterize that, because I think I would be on that side. And actually, I've had some experience, and I'll speak to it in a moment.
Yeah. I mean, it's not always, the first experience, it wasn't even what I would consider a breakthrough experience. It was sub-breakthrough, in that I didn't go all the way, and yet still I was knocking on the door of something that shocked me. And I think it's, for many people, the first experience, it's so shocking that not remembering is almost like a defense mechanism. It's like, there's no time to be forming memories here. We just have to kind of face this.
Right. You're not taking notes in there.
You're not taking mental notes. Exactly. You just kind of go, oh my God, when is this going to be over? Fortunately, it is over in just a few minutes. It's a very rapid experience. It doesn't last for hours. It's like 5 minutes. So yeah, that's kind of me. Some people can seem very, very, particularly experienced people. There are many people, far more experienced, who do this very, very, very regularly, and often they are able to describe in great detail exactly what happened from the moment the drug entered their brain until they come out again. But that takes practice. I think you have to kind of have to learn to do that, learn to relax, and learn to take notice, learn to pay attention, rather than just being kind of wide-eyed and open-mouthed and agog.
But you have a research objective, I believe it's called DMTX, right? And the X, I would assume, is for extending the trip. Am I right there? Okay.
Yes.
But when you said you're glad to get out of there, one of the questions that has stuck with my head, and please describe it, but I also, if you could, land on, why wouldn't some people get in there, and you're stretching it out for them to an hour, and they don't want an hour? But go ahead, tell us what DMTX is, and what the research objectives are, and where it fits in the understanding of the drug so far.
Yeah. So as I said, DMT, it's a very brief drug. It enters the brain and it's cleared from the brain very, very rapidly. It's kind of very unusual. It's unlike other psychedelics in that way. And it also has this peculiar quality of not exhibiting what's called subjective tolerance, which means that you can inject someone with DMT, and they will have a certain intensity of experience, and then you inject them again 30 minutes later and the intensity exactly the same. You can do that repeatedly. And what that means is that you can actually use a technique from anesthesiology called target controlled intravenous infusion, which is what they use in when they put someone under for surgery, for example. They use a very fast acting and short acting anesthetic, and they will infuse it using a programmed infusion device into the person's bloodstream. The idea being to kind of reach and maintain a stable level of the anesthetic over time, so they can keep the individual in the anesthetized state for as long or as short a period as they want, and then bring them out at the end by stopping the infusion. And so it occurred to me back in 2015 that we could use this same technique with DMT. So rather than anesthetic drug, we put DMT into this infusion device, and we bring the brain concentration up to a certain level. And there was a lot of kind of mathematical modeling, pharmacokinetic modeling, to kind of get this, to show that this would work. And so once you have the stable DMT level in the brain, then you can keep someone in the DMT state, induce them into the state, and keep them there for as long or as short a period as possible. And so I published this with Rick Strassman in 2016. Of course, Rick Strassman did the world's largest study of DMT in human subjects in the 1990s.
Absolute pioneer, as are you, but Strassman
Absolutely
was a priceless human.
Absolutely. And so we published this as a theoretical proposal, and then Imperial College kind of picked up the mantle and thought, okay, we're going to do this in humans. So they refined the model, and then in around 2020 was, I think, when they started doing the study, and then they published it in 2022, I think, and just to show that it worked, that it was safe, that it was tolerable, and that they were able to extend the experience from just a few minutes up to 30 minutes, an hour or longer. People have been, anecdotally, people have been doing it now for several hours within the DMT space. Now, the question is, why would you want to do that? I think if you take the DMT state seriously and you really do want to understand it, then you need to be able to, spend time in there. Quite simply, if you want to do experiments, you want to explore,
like a longer spacewalk. The longer time you can spend out there, the more things you can do. Yeah.
Exactly. It's kind of like the difference between free diving and deep sea diving. Free diving, you can dive down and hold your breath and have a look around, but then you've got to pop back up again, right?
Yeah.
But once you've got a line from the boat, and you can go much deeper, and you can go for much longer, as long as the air supply is maintained. You can get more done. So you can do experiments in there. You don't have to worry about having to go back up again. And it's the same kind of thing with DMT. In my opinion, you can send in mathematicians into this space. You can send in linguists or anthropologists or artists or anyone who has a specific specialty, a specific field of expertise, and they can go into this space, and they can be tasked with gathering certain types of data. So, can they analyze the structure of the space? What is the mathematical, what is the topological or geometric structure of the space? What levels of the space are there? What are the entities? What kind of language? What are these strange symbols that often appear within the space? Linguistically, how are they interesting? All this kind of stuff. You stop treating DMT just as a trip, and you start treating it as an unexplored domain, uncharted territory,
an expedition.
An expedition, precisely. So it becomes an expedition, and people can go on these expeditions for 30 minutes if they want, as long as they want, or as short as they want. They don't have to stay for 30 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, but maybe they want to stay for an hour or 2 hours.
But can they signal they want to come back?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're not completely they don't look completely comatose. I mean, there's still an ability, because, I mean, in the Imperial study, Imperial College London, who did the first DMTX study, they were actually asking them questions like, how intense is it now? from 1 to 10, do you see entities?
Right.
Yes or no? This kind of thing. So there is the potential for two-way communication. As long as people are experienced and they're used to dealing with the DMT space, then that is possible. So yeah, sure. You're not entirely cut off.
I forget whether it was Rogan or Bell's Limitless, but you described, I believe it was a mathematician or something very similar that went in and saw geometrical mathematical puzzles solved
Mm.
that can't be done by the regular unaffected brain. And tell us about that person. I mean,
Yeah, so that guy's a very, very fascinating character called
yeah, it sounded like it. Yeah.
Andres Gomez Emilson. He runs a think tank in the States called the Qualia Research Institute.
Okay.
It's a group of very intelligent people, often mathematically minded people who are very interested in the kind of mathematical properties of consciousness and how the
Yeah.
structure and topology of consciousness changes as you go from one conscious state to another. But this particular experience with DMT, which is one of the experiences that made him question whether it really was just a hallucination, was this: he met these beings or some kind of entity that was, as you say, was performing tricks, if you like, but
Yeah.
they were mathematical tricks. They were painting the walls with 4 colors,
Right.
which sounds beautiful, pretty, but
Mhm.
there's actually an interesting mathematical theorem behind that called the 4-color theorem, which
All
basically
right.
says that if you have a surface like a map with all different shapes,
Yeah.
you can always color them with 4 colors so that no 2 colors um,
Yeah.
are butting against each other, like you would try to color a map of the United States, for example. You can always do it
Right.
with 4 colors. But the more complex the surface becomes, the more complex the map becomes. It becomes rapidly beyond the ability of a
Sure.
human. It takes hours and hours to actually kind of work out what the color should be. These entities were kind of painting the walls with these colors and doing it perfectly, no mistakes, error free, basically solving this mathematical problem instantaneously and repeatedly. Now, what's interesting here is that most people, if they saw that, they would go, "Oh, that's really cool." But when you send in a mathematician, they go,
Yeah.
"Wait a minute, that's not just cool. That's not possible. There's no way that a human could actually do that." So they were performing mathematical operations that a human brain shouldn't be able to perform. And this is, I think, where the kind of experiments that you can do to really test what we're dealing with here. If they can really, and there are other examples that he gave, but that's the simplest one to kind of to intuit.
Mhm.
But if you send in mathematicians who can observe these beings,
Excuse me.
because these beings, it's like they can't help but betray their intelligence. It's like they love showing off. They love
Yeah,
kind
they
of
like to show off.
befuddling you, and
Uh-huh.
when they start befuddling you by doing things that human brains can't do, then that makes you think, oh, wait a minute, are we actually dealing with some kind of intelligence that is beyond the human here?
Was
So
that
yeah, I think
gentleman a skeptic? Did he think it was hallucinations and it made him think differently?
I think he, as a good scientist, so to speak, that should always be the default, right? That should be the
Sure.
Occam's razor explanation, is that it's some form of hallucination. And so you're looking for something that would discount that, basically, that would mitigate against that idea. And I think he doesn't. He's on the fence. He's agnostic, as am I. I think maybe I sit slightly further towards the external intelligence than he does,
Mhm.
but always, always on the fence to some extent. And I think that's important. I
Well, you
certainly
can't
never
be
would
as useful if you're not on the fence.
exactly. Yeah. Once you've
Yeah.
decided what you're dealing with, then it's just a religion. Then basically, it's just an ideology. So
Well,
yeah, that
I think you
yeah,
said on one of the shows that you have no idea what you're dealing with. I mean, you've been studying this for 20 years, and you
yeah.
know a
I don't
lot
think
about what you
anyone
don't know,
in the
but
world,
I'll
yeah, I
say
don't
that
think
again.
anyone in the
I'm
world
sorry to
really
interrupt.
knows what we're
Yeah.
dealing with here, and I
Okay.
wouldn't claim to. That's why I refer to them as intelligent agents, because that's as much as I want to say, because as soon as you say, oh, these are spirits or these are aliens, then you've kind of made that, you've cut yourself off from other possibilities. And so I don't know what we're dealing with. All I know is that I can't explain it within the kind of standard paradigm of modern neuroscience. I'm left still. There's still this vast gap that remains very, very difficult to explain. And that's when you have to start entertaining alternative hypotheses. And my alternative hypothesis is that we're dealing with some kind of intelligent, non-human, discarnate, intelligent agent that is far beyond the human.
Distinguish kind of trips you're talking about with ayahuasca. Ayahuasca can be a couple of 3 hours long, right?
Yeah, so ayahuasca it's an oral preparation. So you drink a drink, basically a decoction of DMT. So DMT is not orally active. If you swallow a gram of DMT, nothing will happen. But when you combine it with what's called a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, MAO inhibitor, which comes from another plant, you have a DMT containing plant, then you have a plant that contains the MAO inhibitor, and that basically stops the DMT from being broken down in your gut and allows it to get into the brain. And that will last for 2 or 3 hours, but you're still kind of at the mercy of pharmacokinetics. You're still at the mercy of your brain's metabolic processes. The levels will rise in the brain, and then they will peak, and then they will gradually start to fall. And the levels that you reach with ayahuasca, brain DMT levels, are only around 20% of the level that you reach with breakthrough pure DMT.
Oh,
So
so it's
it's
lighter
completely
but
different.
longer. Lighter but longer?
Lighter but longer, and and it has a natural course of rise and fall, but much more drawn out. Normal DMT, when you inject it, it rise very rapidly, peak, and then drop off very rapidly, which is why it's only 5 minutes. Whereas with ayahuasca, imagine stretching that curve out to a couple of hours. So it rises slowly, it peaks, and then it drops off very slowly. So it's very different to DMTX, where you're bringing it up to with 100% pure DMT to a very, very high level, much higher than you achieved with ayahuasca. It's possible to it doesn't have to be that much, but that's the standard breakthrough
Very
level.
interesting. I might have guessed
Then you hold
differently.
it.
The trip descriptions I've seen on ayahuasca, and I actually attempted, I went all the way to Peru to commune with Mother Aya, and did not do so. Which there are probably not many people in that category. But at the time, I was struggling with high blood pressure. I mean, not struggling, but I had it. And 7 retreats, which is a wonderful group in Peru, and I'd like people to look up there if they have any interest in doing such a thing. They could not be more responsible, wonderful people that are able to take you on this experience, Coleman Goodman, etc. And they had a very responsible onboarding process, right? With long discussions with a nurse before you get down there, a cleansing. I didn't drink anything for a month or maybe a little longer, and got all ready for this. But as part of the onboarding, we discussed my high blood pressure, and we agreed that if I had high blood pressure and was getting a high reading, then we wouldn't do it. And so I got a blood pressure cuff so we could do it down there. And the night before I go down there, it's the highest blood pressure reading I'd ever had in my entire life.
Well, that's
And
not
I said,
surprising
"Oh,
in a way.
yeah, it is or isn't surprising." Oh, you mean being a kind of like, yeah. There were a
Well,
number
I
of
mean,
things.
you're going to be nervous and anxious. So I wouldn't expect your blood pressure to be lower than it normally is.
Well, we were probably overcautious, but I had a lot of people that were concerned about me going down there, which is a blessing. And I wanted to be as responsible as I could be. And I made this agreement with them, and I went down there, and it never dropped. I mean, they got so concerned about it. We went to a local clinic and all of that. They took such good care of me, and it wasn't like I fell ill or anything, but I just had off the charts blood pressure. And so I experienced 3 absolutely wonderful, God, what do you say? It's not sessions. There's another term.
Ceremonies. Often.
Ceremonies. There you go.
Yeah.
Excuse me. 3 wonderful ceremonies with a fantastic shaman from the Amazon and whatnot. But I didn't participate in the drug. I was there. I listened to the chanting. I lay on the floor. We had an absolutely gorgeous little pagoda we were in. I mean, it just couldn't have been nicer thing. So I had a nice trip, and I saw and learned more about ayahuasca than you possibly could without doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, you go on 3 nights in a row, 3 or 4 hours each, and spend a whole week talking about it and getting to know the shaman and all of that. I learned a lot about it, but I didn't do it. And I'll tell you, strangely enough, the final night, the shaman, Edingo, he spoke Spanish, but it was translated by Coleman. He said, listen, tonight, I'm really concentrating on you hard. And you listen to my chants just as closely as you can. And I was like, okay, thank you. And he was trying to exercise whatever my problem was. And a couple hours into the chanting, which is very interesting chanting, it's just not at all what I thought. It's very high pitched. I have no idea what they're saying, but it has a certain lyricalness to it that's just beautiful and completely unique. So you listen to this for a couple hours, and I had an experience. I mean, it talked me into, I was in a room, there was floors above me that could look down on me, and there were 3 entities in there that I could not see. And then I had sleep paralysis in a sense where I was wanting to come out of it, and I was not asleep. And I actually do lucid dream, you know, not as much as I did when I was a kid, but I'm very experienced with that. And it wasn't that, and it wasn't panic. I want to get out of it. It was kind of like, hey, I kind of want to break free from this. And Coleman had to kind of baby me back. And I came out of there completely shocked, if you will, for the uniqueness of it. And I had taken no drugs. I hadn't taken drugs in, long time, and smoking pot, anything like that. And he kind of talked me into a trip. Now, certainly not with the others. There were only 3 or 4 others. It was great. Kind of had the whole gang to myself for the week. But we did have 3 other people who were tripping. And of course they had, full bodied experiences, but I thought it was very interesting. And then I came back, went immediately to my cardiologist, and have not had high blood pressure since.
Wow. It healed
I mean,
you. Amazing.
What do you say? So it's like Mother Aya did me a big favor. She just didn't introduce herself. Right.
Yeah.
Potentially, or maybe it's just a coincidence. I mean, they upped my blood pressure medication, but when I went in this was within 4 days from having sky high blood pressure, get home, wait a couple of days, go and see the cardiologist. They hadn't changed my prescription. They did right then, but just because I'd had these high readings and they were all registered on my app and everything, but it was not high on the trip that I went in. It had already repaired itself to some degree. And then I got re-prescribed, and I hadn't had any problem with it since. And if I may go on a little bit, just to give my own experience, because I'll have some questions surrounding it. The 3rd day of the Cosmic Summit, you may be aware that I hold an annual event called the Cosmic Summit. We'd like you to be a part of that in the future after we get a date on it in some form or fashion. You're a long way away, though. A very good friend of mine offered early on, he said, I'm bringing a DMT vape pen, and let me know if you want to experience it. And I'm usually, game for such things, if, hesitant like anybody and anxious and whatnot. But I like to try new things, and I'm curious as hell. And I had obviously just missed the ayahuasca trip 6 months before and not done it. So I said, sure, but I'm running this big event. I don't think, out of an abundance of caution, I don't think I need to be tripping balls unless everything is settled down, maybe on the 3rd night. Or maybe it's the 4th night, I forget. The 4th night where I had any responsibilities. If everything is settled and it's cool and it just feels right, Phil, I'd like to give it a try. And damn if it didn't. And I went up there and hit that vape pen. But you were knocking on the door the first time you did it. I could see the door. I didn't get all the way there by any means, but it was unlike any other experience I had. It's just like any other kind of drug. The first time using it, oh, now I kind of get it. That's not like this. It's not like that. And this is what leads me to the question. One of my memories of it, and I did not remember. I actually wouldn't. I mean, I saw the geometry and the topology change both visually and eyes closed, and you could tell there was a lot more to see.
Yeah.
But then afterwards, I had a very good, and you talk about a nerve-wracking thing is putting on one of these conferences, right? I was as calm and cool and collected. It seemed to have a soothing and integrating effect on me, just having that fairly light experience. I think the first time I hit it once, it's like a thing. He said, hit it. I forget how you put it. Hit it once, you'll know what it's about, or something. Hit it twice, hit it 3 times, you're gonna go all the way there, all this kind of stuff. So I did it once, then I did it twice, and then I did it 3 times. Okay, but do you ever hear of people like that? That after it's over, it seemed to be healthy for the brain? I mean, I wasn't feeling scattered. I wasn't feeling burnt out or strung out or any of that kind of stuff, because it can happen after some drugs. I felt better and went downstairs and was me better a
Yeah.
little bit. Do people,
Yeah.
or maybe that was just my mindset given the circumstances. Do people come away from it and say, "Hey, I feel more mentally healthy in any way"?
Oh, absolutely. And
Oh, they
many people use it for that purpose. It's like when you're in, your brain is always kind of gets into these patterns. Your brain is very good
Mhm.
at forming kind of habits, if you like, like neurological habits.
It's very healthy for us over the millennium.
You've got these very kind of
Yeah,
rigid, kind of um, kind of network activity in the
yeah,
brain, and if you are particularly stressed and wired, it's kind of you're kind of locked into a certain state,
that was
and
me.
that's not necessarily entirely positive.
Right.
And then DMT and other psychedelics as well, you'll see a similar effect. Is kind of it loosens everything up. It kind of allows everything to kind of settle back. It kind of
Yeah,
breaks all of those negative patterns and frees everything up, like shaking up a snow globe. And
yeah.
then it all settles back down into a kind of a more neutral state. And so many people will describe um, feeling, people suffer with depression or anxiety. They will say that, oh, just for a few days or even longer after doing DMT, I just feel better, feel more
Mhm.
positive, I feel more relaxed, I feel more optimistic. So what you're, less stressed. So what you're describing, it comports very well with what many people experience, and that's why many people use psychedelics, not
Right,
just DMT, but psilocybin and LSD.
and that's why I'm learning from you. I was aware of that effect with ayahuasca. A lot of people do
Mm.
it to kinda integrate their life better, get over trauma, et cetera, and so forth, and do it carefully. So I kind of attributed it to ayahuasca, but I didn't think hitting some little vape pen might have those same benefits.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's pure DMT going into the brain, having a very dramatic but short-lived effect, just shaking up the whole system and allowing it to settle back. And so, yeah, even if you don't get a breakthrough experience, you might not have encounters with entities or anything like that. You might not be ostensibly kind of healed,
Right.
explicitly healed by entities or something, but just the whole brain just is just allowed to become liquid. It's kind of like going from glass, which is very rigid, and
Yeah.
then you heat it up and it becomes more fluid, and then you can kind of mold it into any shape you want, and then it cools down again and sets into that new shape. And it's
Yeah.
kind of
The
similar with the
default mode
brain.
loses its grip,
Yeah,
where the default mode is
exactly. Yeah,
100% king for most of us all the damn time.
right.
It just makes
Exactly.
all the sense in the world that these things would be
Mm.
beneficial, and the God knows there's so many just horrible drugs. There's a
Yeah.
duality to drugs that's just unbelievable.
Oh, for
And
sure.
yeah, and it's done great damage. What is the legal status of DMT around the world? What's the landscape of its legality?
In most places, what we would call the modern West, I guess it's 100% illegal.
Mhm.
It's illegal in Japan. It's illegal in the UK, where I'm originally from. It's illegal in the United States. It's illegal in almost every country, across Europe. This is why, I mean, the DMTX stuff now, I'm working with a company who have a special license to use DMTX in the Caribbean. So it's actually not
Please
so
mention the
far.
name if you like. You can also
Yeah,
put it.
so I work with a company called Eleusis,
Okay.
Eleusis, and what they have now is actually have a special license with the government in the Caribbean, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Yeah.
They're opening a research and retreat center in this beautiful, obviously beautiful Caribbean setting,
Yeah.
with anesthesiologists and psychiatrists and the nursing practice. So anyone can apply if they go to
I
elusismind.com,
want to go.
ELEUSIS
I
mind.com.
want to go. Are
Yeah,
you also contributing to science when you do it? Is it both a retreat
absolutely.
and they're
But
picking up data?
exactly. So it's a retreat center, but it's also a research center. So people will go to the island, spend several days, and there are different lengths of time you can stay for. You can stay for 4 days, you can stay for a week, and undergo a number of DMTX experiences, all in a very well controlled, medically supervised. Because DMTX, it's a serious business. You're injecting someone with an infusion of a drug for an
Mhm.
extended period of time. So it needs to be done properly. People need to be properly medically screened. It needs to be administered by an anesthesiologist. You need a care team in medical supervision in the room, all that kind of thing. So
Right.
that's what it provides. It's the world's first kind of DMTX research retreat center where anyone can sign up. As I said, you go to elusismind.com, ELEUSIS mind.com.
Good. I was going to ask you
People
to
can
say it again, and I was just surfing around to see if I could see it. If you go there, will it talk about the island and the opportunity for that experience?
Yes, if you go there,
Okay.
or you can also go to my website, alieninsect.net, and there's also a
Right.
link to it there. But yeah, so it's kind of it was always my dream from the beginning that you would take DMTX out of the standard kind of university institutions and actually
Yeah.
open it up as something that anyone can do. I don't think we're there yet because people have to travel to the Caribbean, of course. You can't do it in
Oh,
the US legally. But it's
yeah.
not so far, a couple of hours from Miami or something on a
Mhm.
light aircraft.
Well, while we're
So
being a
it's
little
yeah.
commercial, I didn't want to miss pimping your book, Death by
Oh yeah,
Astonishment. All
Death
right.
by Astonishment. There it is.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about it and tell me about the name.
Yeah, the name. Well, the name comes from a very famous quote by Terence McKenna. He was asked, "Is DMT dangerous?" And he said, "The only risk with DMT is death by astonishment."
No, that's
With
great, man.
Yeah, because I mean and he was only half joking. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so astonishing. Astonishment is a very rare emotion. Most people are
Well,
very
that's what
rare
they
to
were afraid was
actually.
going to happen to me in Peru. That I
Yeah,
had to
there
have
we go.
blood pressure and I'd somehow, there's like what a handful of deaths
Yeah,
from this stuff, but it just, I don't know. I do not think even with high blood pressure, I was going to die, but I don't know. I guess that was an example of somebody, having to back out because he might've had death by astonishment.
right. Yeah. So that's why I chose the name of the book, because that, to me, that captures DMT uh, in a beautiful phrase from Terence McKenna. But really, the book is the story of DMT, and how I became interested in DMT, how DMT was discovered by Western science, first in the ayahuasca preparation. How was ayahuasca discovered back in 1852, all the
Yeah.
way through up to the experiments in the 1950s, and worked with Timothy Leary and then Terence McKenna, and basically science's struggle. I try to
Mhm.
lay out exactly why science has struggled and continues to struggle to explain how this drug, this simple plant molecule, can have such astonishing effects on human consciousness, how it's able to transport you to these thoroughly alien worlds, and what I think the alternative explanations are. So really, if you're interested in really understanding what DMT is about, where it came from and where it might be going, then please read Death by Astonishment.
Well, I certainly will. And like I say, it's the third author in a row that I've had on the show and have not bought their book before it, but I'm gonna put them all in a little pile back here. So I'm gonna eventually have a
Wonderful.
bookcase that's filled with nothing but guests, great books.
Fantastic.
Where when would that resort or facility open? I'm kind of curious on that. I mean,
Next
is it
month,
gonna happen?
well,
Next month?
March, towards the end of March is when the first cohort of participants are booked to go onto the island. So it's, yeah, depending on when people are listening now, it could already be open.
Huh. Okay, on the subject of kind of emergent intelligence, where did it come from? You didn't come with it. It's presented to you. Therefore,
Mm.
you know, where the hell did it come from? There's got to be some element in that in all psychedelics. I use as my kind of own example, taking psilocybin and laying in a field, looking up at the stars. This was a few years ago, but it's a very relaxed setting, and I'd like to get to that too. But um, I saw Aztec motifs that I'm unable to have drawn myself or even conceptualize. And I was even able to think about it at that time and look at it very closely and say, I can't draw that. I couldn't have imagined it outside of this state. That's archetypal. And why is it Aztec? I wasn't seeking it to be. And it was just taking the stars and rearranging them and presenting a beautiful iconography to me that is completely alien to me. So it had to come from another place, although it's a far different experience and not nearly as profound. Do you believe other drugs tap into things, or are those inside our head, just like all of us have abilities that just are unlocked?
Uh, I don't think I'm not 100% kind of DMT exceptionalist. I think DMT is the most efficient tool these for accessing these other realms, these other intelligences. But I think other drugs can also achieve this. You know, very high doses of psilocybin mushrooms, for example, will take
Right.
you to a state that many people describe as being, you know, comparable to the DMT
Right.
state, but much slower. So
And
I don't
without
think
common
it's a
characters, if
binary
I'm
thing. I
right,
don't think.
without common characters, I mean, you don't have mischievous imps
Well,
translating between
some people
various different
do.
strokes. Do they? Okay.
Some people do, but very rarely, and you really have to push it with the dosage to reach those kind of states. With
Mhm.
DMT, it's like a switch. It's like I mean, it really is a switch. I mean, 1 second you're in the normal waking world, and 30 seconds later, you're literally in a completely different reality.
Mhm.
So I think DMT is the most efficient tool we have. I think you can. I don't think it's a binary. I think that other molecules. I think really what's happening is that what psychedelics do, as I said before, is they create this very fluid and dynamic state of the brain where it's much more sensitive to inputs. You can actually
Mhm.
see in neuroimaging if you give someone DMT and you perturb their brain, you stimulate their brain somehow, you will find that you will get a much stronger response when the subject is under the influence of DMT. It's like the brain is it's like you've turned up the gain, you know,
Hmm.
on an amplifier or something. And then you get all these weird feedback effects. With DMT, it's kind of like that. You're turning up the sensitivity of the brain. And that's the state where I think this intelligent agent can effectively assume control
Mhm.
of your neural architecture. I always say you don't break through into the DMT world. The DMT world breaks through into you. Your cortex is your brain is like the stage, and you create this very fluid and dynamic and sensitive neurological state that allows then these intelligent agents, whatever they are, to commandeer your neural machinery for a few minutes, and that allows them then to kind of show you. This is why DMT it's often a show, it's a performance.
Mhm.
It's obvious they have complete control over what you're seeing. They show you the visions, and I think they do that by accessing your brain's world building machinery. You know, the machinery that your brain uses to construct the world that you experience. They have control of it for a few minutes, so they show you what they want you to see, basically.
I'm probably paraphrasing, but you've said in some manner that reality is playful. Does that ring
Hmm.
a bell? It's one of my notes on how to, yeah. I thought that was so interesting that there's an element of the absurd in the what appears to be the most profound.
Yeah, I think DMT shows you that, because DMT, it has this comical ambience to it. It is extremely strange. It is bizarre. It is inexplicable. It is incomprehensible, and yet there is this playful element to it, as if it's like they're letting you in on the joke. Um,
Right, right,
the cosmic joke is often described. I think that's kind of how I see reality, and that's not my idea. It's a very old, ancient idea that goes back to ancient Hindu philosophy. The idea that
right.
Brahman is playing, Leela is the cosmic drama. He's playing at constructing the worlds. Alan Watts describes this beautifully. This idea of the cosmic drama. And that there's nothing to fear, because it's all illusion. It's all illusion and play.
Mhm,
That's the key. And so all form, all content, all structure, all experience within form is illusory. It's all
mhm.
illusion, and it's all in play. None of it is fundamentally serious, in
Really?
a kind of very grave way. It's all part of this
Mhm,
grand drama. And I think if you go in with that attitude, that you shouldn't take reality too seriously. You can take it
mhm,
sincerely,
mhm.
but then you start to it helps you to kind of relax and realize, actually, this is all part of this grand illusion. It's just another form of illusion, if you like. And I think that's a great way to go to see life and to see reality, rather than being kind of entrenched inside there's some very, very serious purpose behind all of this. I don't think there is. I think it is fundamentally a play of consciousness, if you like. We're getting into kind of more metaphysical stuff now, but I don't sound like it to most people. I often sound like I'm a hard materialist scientist. Well, some
Mhm.
people would think that, but actually, fundamentally, I consider myself to be a philosophical idealist. I think that consciousness is fundamental. I don't think there is anything else but consciousness, and I think that reality is a play of consciousness. And DMT allows you to access other qualities, other structures of consciousness, but it's all the same thing ultimately.
Mhm. The Cosmic Summit audience in this podcast that's got one, we're generally interested in the ancient and the unexplained and the anomalous parts of
Mm.
ancient history. And I probably should have addressed it earlier because those people are out there, and one of them, me included. How much influence do you think this molecule had on ancient peoples? Where does it fit in? I mean, that's getting to Brian Murray Rescue's book, but or is that less of your research and you stay away from that speculation? Maybe give us your personal opinion, but do you think they had access to the molecule?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, we know that, well, ayahuasca, and ayahuasca,
Thousands of
DMT,
years ago. Mhm.
thousands of years probably, um, um, in caves, people have found um, kind of ancient snuffs that contain DMT. So there are these
Yeah.
snuffs that are also used that contain DMT, apena, cahoba. These are, there's evidence that their use goes back thousands of years. Magic mushroom use probably similarly. So I don't think it's exclusively DMT. I think there's a range, but clearly we can say that altered states of consciousness have been a part of human experience since time immemorial, shall we say. And it's only recently that really, in historical terms, it's only very, very recently that we've treated altered states of consciousness with such suspicion. It's
Right.
treated them as pathological and things to be avoided. Whereas in the past, of course, the further you go back, you would have found that the altered states of consciousness were treated as just as valuable, if not more valuable, than normal mundane waking experience. So whether it's DMT specifically, I think there's as I say, a range of different plant-based and fungi-based preparations that have been in use consistently for thousands of years. How far it goes back? Does it go back tens of thousands of years? Maybe. Again, it becomes difficult to measure that when you start further.
Is there any indication that people in the Middle East had the recipe, for instance, from getting to acacia to DMT? Because I know acacia has DMT in it, right? As do many plants. But the recipe is complex and unlikely in the Amazon, which is something I'd like you to touch on too, for people that aren't familiar with this discussion, because it's one of the most foundational things about it, one of the most interesting. But there's complex, unlikely recipe, to say the very least, in the Amazon. Does anybody have a recipe for how you get it from acacia? Is there any kind of old remaining indications that they had a way to get from acacia to DMT?
Not as far as I'm aware. I mean, I'm happy. I'd be delighted to be corrected on that. I think the issue, does actually relate to what you mentioned about ayahuasca, is that you can't just smoke the plant, you can't just eat the plant, you can't even just boil up the plant in a pot. If you do that, basically nothing significant will happen, because DMT is not orally active, and that's kind of what makes it particularly interesting. Is that you can live on, in Taiwan, for example, contains perhaps the highest concentration of Acacia confusa in the world. And Acacia confusa contains the highest concentrations of DMT of practically any plant that we're aware of. And so Taiwan probably is the most DMT drenched little island in the whole world. And yet there's no history of psychoactive use. I mean, the plant is used in traditional medicine, but not as a psychoactive, because you would never know that it contained DMT unless you were able to either extract it and consume it by vaporizing it or whatever. And that's very much a 20th century thing, being able to extract it and isolate it. Or the alternative is to develop this technology, which they seem to have developed miraculously in Southern America, in South America.
Yeah, why is it miraculous? And it certainly is. It just blows my mind. It's not complex, but explain to people why it's so unlikely.
Well, what's kind of remarkable about it is that if you take either, as I said, there are two plants, a minimal binary decoction ayahuasca is. You need to have two plants. There's up to 100 or more plants that can be used and added to it, but you need two plants. One is the plant that contains DMT, and there are a couple of prominent examples. One called Chacruna, Psychotria viridis, and another one called Banisteriopsis rusbiana, Chakrapanga. These contain DMT, but if you boil those up in a pot with some water and drink it, nothing will happen. The other plant contains the MAO inhibitor. This comes from the ayahuasca vine, Banisteriopsis carpi. And if you boil that up on its own, then you might have something of an altered state, but it's not particularly dramatic. But when you put them together,
out of 10,000 plants, I mean, or God knows how many different plants in the Amazon, and it has to be prepared carefully. So if you do the math, you're not going to bump into it in regular household food preparation.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. And I think that's what makes it remarkable. And I think people underestimate actually the sophistication of the Amazonian peoples. I mean, when Richard Schultz, the great German-American ethnobotanist, was studying arrow poisons back in the 1950s, I mean, he found that they were adding plants to this strychnine based curare paste. Strychnine was the actual toxin. They were adding these other plants, and it was a mystery. Like, why are they adding these plants? What's the point in that? Doesn't make any sense. These are non-toxic plants. Why are they adding that to an arrow poison? It was only then a few decades later when we realized, oh, these plants contain molecules that inhibit metabolism, that increase the ability of the toxin to get into the bloodstream. They speed up, they hasten the effects of this toxin. And it's like, oh, these are technologies. These are
Right.
pharmacological technologies. They're not
Right.
just throwing plants together and saying, let's add a bit of this and a bit of this. They're
Yeah.
developing. These are pharmacological tools that they use and have developed over, perhaps centuries or thousands of years and refined. Even though they don't understand the precise biochemistry, they've worked out that if you add this plant to the arrow poison, it works much more quickly and more effectively. And I think it's something similar with ayahuasca in some way. I don't think it's necessarily a magical thing. I think it's more we simply underestimate the ability, how tuned in to the forest and to the plant kingdom these peoples are, and how I don't know how they arrived at ayahuasca, but they will tell you the plant spirits told them, and I'm not one to judge on that. But I think I think we just simply underestimate their sophistication, their botanical sophistication. We probably wouldn't arrive on it, as kind of dumb Westerners. We probably wouldn't arrive and land on the ayahuasca formulation, but these
Not
far
without
more.
test tubes and a couple of $1 billion. Right.
Right, exactly. Right, exactly. We would get there eventually, but we'd get there from a completely different kind of Western perspective by deconstructing these plants and finding the active components and then working out how they work in the brain, all that kind of stuff. Whereas they kind of arrived through a different way of understanding the plant kingdom that I don't think we can quite get our heads around.
Yeah, let me return for a second. We'll wrap up. But what's the outlook for legalization in the U.S. for therapeutic uses? MDMA is way ahead. You got psilocybin clinics already opening in certain states. That's pretty good news for this whole field of research. Is it going to get all the way to DMT? Are there any legal trials available? Can you apply? What?
So DMT is becoming more. I mean, as neuropsychological treatment. So psychotherapeutics like depression, anxiety, PTSD.
Right.
The attention has always been on psilocybin and MDMA. But DMT is getting more attention now because it does have this, comparable antidepressant effects, anti-anxiety. It's as good as a healing tool, I think. But I think the benefit of DMT is because it's very short acting, and now that we have this DMTX technology, you can actually you can regulate the experience, regulate someone's journey through the DMT space, bring them push them in deeper or bring them to a lower level to kind of integrate the experience and just, discuss it with the therapist and then go back in and then come back out. You can imagine a very kind of dynamic and regulated DMT journey that could be very, very useful, I think, in psychotherapeutics. And so I think you're going to see more and more. There are a number of studies that have shown antidepressant effects, so from just inhaling a couple of lungfuls of DMT and then kind of measuring someone's level of depression for weeks afterwards, and they see very dramatic effects. So it could be much quicker, actually, and simpler than with psilocybin, where you need to take almost the whole day. Really, this is something you can do in your lunch hour, basically. Which is kind of remarkable. And also cluster headaches, people these described, fortunately, touch wood, I've never experienced a cluster headache, but people who suffer from those, this is the worst pain a human can experience.
I feel so much for people
if you've seen videos of people, I mean, it's harrowing the level of pain that they're in, but they take a puff of DMT and pop, and the headache just disappears. So I think, if you're interested in reducing suffering in the world, I think psychedelics, not just depression and anxiety and these kind of very protracted types of suffering, but these very, very acute and intense kinds of suffering. And again, Andres Gomez Emilson, who I spoke about earlier, he's very interested in helping people. He has like a group who meet and who suffer from cluster headaches, some of them cluster busters, I think they call themselves. And they've been using, because people have been describing using LSD to deal with cluster headaches for a long time, but obviously it takes a long time for it to kick in, whereas with DMT it's 30 seconds and it's in the brain and it's having its effect. And so it could be a bit like the EpiPen. If you imagine when people have an anaphylactic shock and you inject them with epinephrine, adrenaline, and it kind of instantly resolves the issue. You can imagine the same thing with DMT. And you're going to see it in its treatment for strokes as well, because DMT protects the brain in hypoxic states, when there's the lack of oxygen in the brain. So when someone's had a stroke, when they're undergoing a cardiac arrest or something like this, when the brain is deprived of oxygen, you inject them with DMT, and it actually protects the brain. It actually protects brain cells in low oxygen environments. So I think you're going to see DMT being used across a range of conditions once it is legalized and approved. But I'm not an expert on the US legal system, so I don't know how close that's likely to be. There's always another hurdle to get over. But hopefully in the next few years, you're going to see the first legal psychedelic therapy in the US. I mean, even in Japan, there's a clinical trial going on with psilocybin at Keio University, actually in Tokyo, quite near to where I live. There's a trial with psilocybin. So I think around the world, you're going to hopefully start to see more and more of these clinics.
Because you're in Japan, and you did a great job on Rogan kind of explaining. Y'all get into Japanese culture. He does such a good job out of getting people out of their central subject and just having a discussion. I wish I had, and maybe, over 1,000 episodes might develop that. But you described how unique the Japanese culture is, and that they're conforming to each other, and it works. It's a courteous conforming and whatnot. What is the level of cultural interest in DMT there? For instance, I don't want to say people are using it recreationally here, but people are using it experimentally here on a private, personal basis. Is there that same interest in Japan? It would seem like a culture like that, it might be kind of like the 1950s here, where what the hell are you talking about, you crazy person?
It's not quite like 1950s. I mean, yeah, there's a psychedelic subculture. I mean, it's quieter.
Is there a psychedelic subculture? Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's quieter. It doesn't advertise itself. But having said that, there are ayahuasca circles in ayahuasca's not illegal as such in Japan. It's in a gray area. It's discouraged. It's discouraged by the government, but they operate fairly openly, and they have, they rent out village halls and do ayahuasca ceremonies. So it's not as people imagine. People imagine that Japan is extremely strict, and in some sense that is true. When it comes to drugs like meth and cannabis, weirdly, there's historical reasons for that I won't get into, but when it comes to psychedelics, I don't think the government are that interested.
God, I'm just so full of questions, and I'm supposed to go eat dinner with some people in a little while. There's no way I'd cut this off for 2 hours, probably longer than you'd want to do it. But give me you said that the worlds can manifest some in the archaic and some in the machine world. Does that ring a bell from the way that there can be two different experiences that are that again, it seems to present itself. Again, I wrote down in my notes, archaic and machine-like. Does that conform with?
Sorry, I lost you for a second there. You'll have to repeat that.
No, that's fine, and I'm sorry. I took some notes of what you were saying, and I hope I got it kind of right, that you said that experience can break down, or at least the entities, the imagery and whatnot can break down between archaic and machine-like. Does that ring a bell? Like there's a mechanical aspect to it, but there's also, I'm sure it's ineffable, but do your best.
Yeah, that's it. That's how I describe it. It seems both ancient and futuristic at the same time.
Right.
It's like a civilization that's been around for trillions of years, and there's a very distinct inorganic technological ambience to the space. It's not like beautiful mystical landscapes and bucolic scenes. It's not like that. It's hard, immaterial, constructed, inorganic kind of place. That's what it feels like. Imagine if you can't, none of us can, but a civilization that's 1 billion years more advanced than us, and what would their cities look like? They probably wouldn't be physical in a way. They probably have transcended the material form by then, I'm sure. It's kind of like stumbling into that kind of civilization that's been going on for far longer than we before we popped onto the scene.
It's
Yeah,
got
that's
to
the kind
be,
of vibe.
yeah, it's got to be somehow planted though. And I mean, food of the gods was where this began, but it's so unlikely that of all the thousands of molecules, why would there be, and this is true for several drugs, but you could add them up, they're not but 20 or so out of, I don't know how many different common non-manufactured molecules there are, but you tell me, tens of thousands. But then there's this set of stuff that happens to fit and unlock something in us. Was that revealed to us, left to us? Is it intrinsic? And I know this is pure speculation,
Mm.
and then you're a scientist, but that's what, I don't know. It's kind of like, I guess McKenna said, that something was left for us or given to us, and it was meant to be, and we're meant to know it, and it's intrinsic. Could you elaborate on kind of like where the hell, why the hell do we have these compounds in our environment?
Yeah, I mean, there is something unnerving about the idea that this very common molecule that is, it's ubiquitous across nature. It's not
Yeah.
like a molecule that you have to go to a very specific plant to find. It's everywhere. It's in humans. It's in countless plant species. It's everywhere you look. If you look out the window, you probably see half a dozen plants that contain some amount of DMT. It's kind of weird that the most common, the simplest of all the naturally occurring psychedelics, the molecule is very, very simple. It's 2 steps from the amino acid tryptophan. I mean, it
Mhm.
couldn't get much simpler. Yet this common, simple molecule just happens to be the most efficient reality channel switch, the most efficient, reliable tool for switching your reality channel to this bizarre, hyper-technological alien reality filled with these super intelligent beings with whom you can communicate. That doesn't feel like a coincidence to me. It feels like there's something going on there. I don't know if it was planted. I don't know what that would look like, how that would work, but it does feel, one can't help shake the feeling that there's something very strange and uncanny
Mhm. And it
about
doesn't seem
that.
to have a hard Darwinian purpose either. That I don't think we would have wrapped our brain chemistry around the ability to react to that molecule because we'd have more babies or something.
No, no, and
Yeah,
and again, it isn't because it's not orally active. It could be there in the environment, and it was there in the environment for millions of
that's
years, and
right.
yet then it takes a certain level of kind of intellectual cognitive development and evolution for a human to actually work out how to use it. You can't just wander the prairies and stumble upon plants and start eating them and have a DMT trip. You have to actually
It's not like
learn how to
marijuana
use
where you gotta, yeah, you gotta actively suppress. It'll
it.
grow
Exactly.
anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
also think that's interesting too. I've always thought that, why does this one weed, why do we have such a relationship with it? And we got one now, legal and embedded in our
Oh
culture.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, like it makes sense to me. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for coming on. It is a real pleasure. And
Very
guys like
welcome.
you that can go on Joe Rogan and then come on a rinky dink little thing like mine, I just love it, buddy. It's great that we can share these ideas. And I think it's profoundly important. And people have heard me say that many times, but sharing guests like you amongst various podcasts and surfacing people who are involved in these profound but either obscure or suppressed ideas, or sometimes culturally unpopular or whatnot, there's a good weaving going on. And
Mm.
you're a part of that weaving. And actually, if I may give one more, 7 retreats is going to be a part of the next Cosmic Summit. And I'll put their link down below, but they're Ayahuasca Healing Center in Peru. And I hope people will consider them. They're wonderful people. And obviously, they went out of their way to protect my own health. So they're just as responsible as they can be. Andrew, thank you again. And good
Thank
luck with
you.
your research, sir.
Thank you very much, George. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. Well, listen, we'll
All
see
right.
you again and maybe at the summit, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Have a good evening,
All right.
sir.
Thank you very much.